Joey, did you do this to this pen while you were up here singing? Well, you were nervous. The pen is wrecked. Beautiful, thank you. And as she was singing, I was thinking, how cool is that? Because to do that, she's been memorizing lyrics and meditating on that message and thinking about that song. And what a great one. What a great one to start with. Thank you for doing that. I know that took a lot of courage, and it wasn't as bad as you thought, was it? It was? Even worse? So we said, no. Easy congregation to sing to and to preach to, so thankful that you extended yourself. You might want to ask yourself, congregation, just how does God want you to step out and extend yourself? Maybe serving at a rescue mission, or meeting your neighbor, or leading a G2 group, or maybe God's calling you to do something along the lines of what Thomas has done, and you need to serve in a place that's maybe even far from here, but again, it could be in our own town. I'm really thankful today that I get to be a part of a church family whose mission is just kind of rises up out of the people that are here. Someone just asked me the other day, a friend who was staying with me and spent the week hunting, said, do you go on mission trips? And while we have and while we will, the cool thing right now is that missions and mission trips and missional activity kind of rises up out of people naturally, without necessarily the church saying, hey, this is what you're going to go do. The church is saying, hey, this is what I am going to go do, or we are going to go do. And that's a really beautiful thing. And so I'm thankful for that. You can't approach Thanksgiving without talking about Thanksgiving. I mean, you just kind of have to. It would be strange not to. And actually, I could do it if it wasn't such an important topic, if it wasn't something that's so crucial to life with God together and for the world. It's central. So I do want to speak about Thanksgiving, but not out of a sense of obligation or it's just on the calendar, so we got to do it. Thanksgiving reminds me of, I took the opportunity just to reflect back over Thanksgivings when I was a kid. And it really was one of my favorite times of the year for several reasons, but some of those that rose to the top is that everybody was home. Everybody kind of came to my parents' house. I'm the youngest by 10 years, and so my brother, who was at Starkville, Mississippi, would come home. I remember he was working on his PhD there. He'd come home. Sometimes he'd bring a friend. Sometimes there would be a student, a grad student from my dad that would come eat Thanksgiving with us. We almost always had someone staying with us. And it was just a neat time. It was a week filled with duck hunting, and which is what I grew up doing. Usually, like I said, we had guests in the home, one or two. But it was just a fun, relaxed feeling in our house. It just kind of invaded. My house wasn't stressful in the first place necessarily, but it was just this, everybody seemed happy, especially when I look back. And I may be looking through rose-colored glasses a little bit, but the dominant thing that rose to the top is just this fun, relaxed atmosphere. I remember one of the things that I thought even was funny when I was in grade school, as I'm remembering some of this, that football was a prominent thing, obviously, in my house. I've talked a lot about it. Nebraska was huge, and my dad was a Cowboy fan. And so football was usually on Thanksgiving Day. And inevitably, one of my dad's friends, a professor from the college usually, would stop by right in the middle of the football game. And so I remember sitting on the couch watching my dad navigate this awkward social situation of trying to be a good host, but trying not to miss the game. So this is before pause. You either turn the TV on or off. There's no such thing as pause and talk and then resume. So it's kind of like, your head's on a swivel and you're trying to listen to both. It's just funny. And I remember throwing the football in the street. It wasn't a busy street, but so we'd get out and throw football in the street. We might play football in the front yard or basketball. I remember pumpkin pie. and thinking I should like it more than I did. I just didn't like it very much. I think one of my favorite ones, and this is I'm just connecting. You won't connect to this probably at all, but this is me. I got up and I was a senior in high school. I know because I had my 1968 Mustang that had a rusted out floorboard and a straight six that didn't make the cool sound that my neighbor across the street had, the 66 cherry red with the 289 that sounded like it should sound, and I didn't drive that. It sounded like I was in my grandma's car. And I drove that thing to Sulphur Springs, 18 miles away, hunting, and that morning was the pinnacle of my hunting career at that time. I got 3 snow geese, and I was so proud. But I remember carrying the snow geese back to the car thinking, I hope my car starts. And I was so thankful when it did. I truly was. Looking back over all of those panorama of memories, I feel a lot of thankfulness. Even though at the time things weren't all perfect. There were times when I remember one particular Thanksgiving when my mom was in the hospital suffering from depression, and we were literally on the phone saying, how do you make a pumpkin pie? And she talked us through that. And even now, I'm just thankful for all that she did and all that my dad did, and just the opportunity that I had to grow up and experience those times. Really, really neat. Being thankful. It's tricky. At least it can be tricky. It's something that we obviously talk about a lot at this time of the year, but I want to think about this in a different way a little bit, because we're encouraged, and we should be, to give thanks and to be thankful. But I was walking through this week, being as honest as I knew how to be with myself, and I realized there are some times that I know I should be thankful, and I'm not. And when I feel in those moments like I have to give voice to something that's not true of my heart, it just compounds some stuff that I don't know is healthy for me. I don't know that it's healthy for you or anybody to say we're thankful when we're not. Because what we end up doing there is saying, I know I should be thankful, and so I will say it in conflict to the real condition of my heart. Now, I'm not saying we should walk around as grumps and giving voice to our complaints. I'm not suggesting that. What I am asking you to consider this morning is it possible for those who are learning to live their lives in the realm of God's kingdom to become people who are thankful, instead of just being people who are told to be thankful or give thanks in spite of maybe the real condition of our hearts? I'm not suggesting that anybody's not thankful for some things. And I think almost any time we stop and think, we could probably find some things that we are genuinely thankful for. That gratitude, that sense of gratitude will well up for some things. There are also things that we can say, I know I should be thankful for, but I don't necessarily have that sense of gratitude that's gripping my heart. So I ask you this very simple question: am I thankful? And if you are, what for and why? Am I thankful? What for? Why do you think for those things you have gratitude? Let's pray and ask God to walk through this with us and make sure we're hearing from Him and not just me. Lord, we wade into waters that are very simple on the surface and can be tricky just beneath the surface. So help us to perceive and know and be responsive to truth today. And let there be no cleverly devised schemes or logic that is on its own apart from you. Help us today to hear directly, deeply from the Spirit of God in our midst. We want to be thankful people, not people who just say thank you. Would you help us today begin that journey or continue it? We bow our heads in reverence and awe. And certainly, if nothing more, awareness. We're in the presence of a living God. Amen. Living thankfully. So we're talking about something we do, or we're talking about something that we are. Those can be two different things. They don't have to be, I understand. So one can be just an action. You know, we teach our kids this way, and it's not a bad thing. It's not a bad thing, but understand and see the dynamic at play. So when somebody gives your child something or gives your grandchild something, and they just take it and walk away, we might stop them and say, "What do you say?" And they will say, usually, "Thank you." We hope. That's a good thing to teach children, to be polite. But it may not be, we may be teaching them to say something that's not really reflective of their heart. Again, children, hear me here. Say thank you all the time when someone does nice things for you, because if nothing else, even if your great aunt, whoever sewed you a sweater and gave it to you, and you're not necessarily thankful that the sweater is being given to you and you're going to be made to wear the sweater, you can say thank you that your great aunt so-and-so made you, thought of, and made that. So we can be thankful sincerely. But what we want to be aware of, and just what I want to call to the surface, is if our thanksgiving is an action or a condition. Is it something we're saying, or is it who we are? Is it a condition that is rising up? So we can think of this maybe in two ways, an action or a condition. And when we are thankful people, the action naturally overflows. When our heart is thankful, our mouths will almost inevitably give voice to that. So it's certainly true that thankfulness is something that we do. We're often told to do that. Even in Psalms, over and over we're told this. In Psalm 75:1, we give thanks to you. It says, "O God, we give thanks, for your name is near. Men declare your wondrous works." Even in one of our key scriptures this morning, 1 Thessalonians 5:8, pray continually, give thanks in all circumstances. We're told, it's a command to give thanks. And so I understand this. Please hear me saying that yes, sometimes becoming thankful is going to require practicing gratitude. And that sometimes we're going to have to give voice to things and enter into a moment where we want our hearts to become aligned with our lips, but maybe the sync isn't necessarily there yet. So God certainly is not simply telling us when we're told to be thankful or give thanks. He's not telling us to just simply be polite, simply give voice to something that's not necessarily true, just out of rote duty. The intention is surely that our words express the condition of our hearts. And here's why, is because being thankful people is the best way to live life. It is a beautiful condition of our hearts. It's not necessarily wrong to say thank you, no matter what. But being thankful is preferable by far. It is the design. It is the beautiful life that God has given us. And it is much, much more than a rule to follow. But so we're invited by God to become thankful people, to be thankful people who joyfully, naturally express gratitude and give thanks. So, if I asked you this, like I asked my G2 group this morning, what are you thankful for? I just want you to call that to mind. I don't want anybody to have to say that out loud or get going down that road. I'll never reel that back in because I'm sure there's a lot of gratitude going on. But I do want you to be aware and maybe just think of what comes to mind when you would say, what am I grateful for? And distinguish for yourselves the difference between what should you be and what are you. And those might be the same, but they might not necessarily be the same. What just rises to the top when you stop and wonder and think, what am I thankful for today? As I asked our group that, it's really was interesting. that many of the responses of what people were grateful for or thankful for were in response to pain or difficulty. And as they came out of it, their response, the condition that they were in, was gratitude for a certain thing. For example, and I'm not saying anything that was in our group, but it's nothing different than if you had the flu for a week. And then that day that you feel better, you're uniquely aware and thankful for feeling better, right? Because that had been taken away, and now you have a backdrop to be thankful. Versus if you're never sick, sometimes it's really hard to be thankful, to truly feel grateful in a fresh and vital way for the fact that you're healthy. It's something we tend to take for granted. And on we could go. That many times adversity creates a sense of gratitude and thankfulness when we don't have it before. And so I want you to think of those things. Keep them in mind and be aware. So let's go to this next thing. That's what we're talking about, an action that leads to a condition, and not just settling for the action or the verbal expression and being polite. Okay, we don't want to stop there. We want that verbal expression to be a true condition of our heart, and it's God's will, but why? So it's God's will, but why? So 1 Thessalonians 5:18 says, in everything. It didn't say for everything, but it does say in everything. Give thanks. Why? For this is God's will for you in Christ Jesus. And it precedes, be joyful always, pray continually, and in everything give thanks. All of those things are God's will for you, but I'm singling this one out because it's Thanksgiving week, and we're focusing on Thanksgiving. Why is it God's will for you to be a thankful person? When we read it, it can sound like we're just told to do what our parents tell us to do when someone does something nice for us. Say thank you. That's the polite thing to do. That's the rule to follow. But it's entirely possible to give thanks for something, as we've said, that we're not genuinely thankful for. That is, our words aren't the expression of our heart. So what is God telling us when He says to give thanks in everything? What is He aiming at? What's the heart behind the message there? When Paul tells us it's God's will for us in 1 Thessalonians, he's not telling us just to be polite. He's not telling us to follow the rule. He's telling us and describing a life that we can have, a condition that we can experience. The psalmist says it like this: it is good, listen to this, it is good to give thanks to the Lord. Not just right, not just polite. It is good to give thanks to the Lord and sing praises to your name, O Most High, in Psalm 92:1. He's not suggesting lip service. He's describing the overflow of a real condition of your heart. So this is God's will for you. It says explicitly, but why? Here's why: because it's good. It is good to give thanks. Not just right, not just moral, not just polite, but it is truly beautiful and good and preferable to be in this condition of gratitude. To be a person who is thankful. You know, when I am not thankful, do you know when I'm not thankful? The most frequent condition that leads to ingratitude and not feeling a sense of thanks is a self-focus. And self-focus almost always comes to me in unhealthy proportions when I'm in need or in pain. Because then I get focused on getting rid of my pain or meeting my need. And so I think about what I don't have and what I wish I did have. And I just begin to think about me. And in those moments, you could come to me and say, Pastor Casey, you should be thankful. I would agree with you. I should be thankful. For instance, I don't have frequent headaches. There are people who do in our congregation. But let's just say I'd had one of those headaches that some people suffer from in debilitating ways. And I'm leaned over in pain. And someone comes and says, you should be thankful that you live in a day when we have ibuprofen or we have, migraine medicine or all that. I could probably agree with you intellectually, but in that moment, I might be in so much pain that it's hard to feel thankful for some other things, because that pain can be so consuming. And I say that example because I want you to know, and I want you to hear that there is an understanding heart of God who is not just simply here to shame us, but to say, yeah, you get it, that sometimes, man, life just flattens you and you don't feel a certain way. But I'm telling you, it is God's will for us to be a certain way, to be thankful. And we can get there even in the midst, even in everything. We can have a heart condition that is truly grateful. It's God's will for your life because it's the best way to experience life. Wouldn't you agree? Isn't it always a great feeling, perhaps some of the best feelings, when you've had a concern or you've had a problem or you've had an issue or some anxiety or stress or pain or suffering, and you've endured and then it's relieved or alleviated? And isn't that a great feeling to go, oh, I'm so thankful. The message here is that exhale of relief and gratitude can increasingly become the real condition of our heart, even in the presence of easy living or no extreme pain. It doesn't have to always be in response to relief. It can be a continual day-to-day condition. And that's why it's God's will, because it's a beautiful way and He wants that way for you. Here's the third thing. How do we move from doing to being? How do I become a thankful person? How does that happen? If we want to become more, how does that work? First thing is simple. It's a word we use a lot here as we talk about becoming like Jesus and not just behaving for Jesus. We literally do this same thing that someone learning to play the trombone would do. We practice. We practice. So I would tell you, if you sit here today and you say, you know what, as I think back among the pinnacles of gratitude in my life, and usually those coming out of a moment of crisis or pain or hardship, and that feeling of relief and that fresh awareness of the good things of my life, I would love to live that way. I would love to be that kind of person. I don't want to wait for this Thursday in November to roll around to really express that. I want to be that kind of. How does that happen? First word is practice. It's going to sound like I'm contradicting myself, but I'm not, because we're going to dovetail that with another thing that is practice giving thanks in all circumstances. So here's what that looks like. Many times when we're ungrateful or we're in pain or we're not really feeling it, right? That is the prime opportunity to stop and force yourself to become aware of the things that you can be thankful for. Now, I don't want to say should be, because, and it's the same message, but if we begin to feel shame and guilt in that process, like I should be, but I'm not, it kind of messes everything up. Then we start struggling with guilt and like, I wish I could be this. So we become aware of just the simple things that we could all name them right here today, of many, many things that we are grateful for or we have to be thankful for. And obviously there's a multitude of those things. And in these moments, if we want to become a person who is genuinely a thankful person, we train our focus to be on those things. We practice calling them to mind, especially when they are not at the forefront. When pain and suffering and hardship and stress and anxiety is at the forefront, we practice pushing that aside and saying, I have these things that I could be thankful for. I could focus on these good things. My heart's broken, my heart's worried, my heart feels bad, I feel heavy, or maybe I feel physical pain or emotional pain, or maybe I'm still reeling in an addiction or whatever, but I have these things. I have this friend, I have this house, I have this Bible, I have this group, have this place to come to on a Sunday. Whatever it is, and you begin to say, and you practice saying, identifying those things, and saying, I do have these things for which I can be thankful. And you begin to give them your attention. You practice training your focus to be on the abundant good that surrounds us. And it surrounds us. Really, that's at the heart of Thanksgiving. At least it is what could potentially be at the heart of Thanksgiving, is reorienting our focus. You know, I have a friend that, he doesn't live here. So I'm not speaking of one of my friends here, so no one's trying to guess, and I mean that. He doesn't live here. But in general, he is a profoundly simple, in terms of thought processes, easy to please person. Okay, in general, he's just one of those guys. He's just not high maintenance. He's easy. But if you turn on the news and the political spectrum begins to land in his life, a switch is flipped. And the gratitude and the easy to please person is replaced by a very frustrated, ungrateful person in this realm. What changes? Focus. Just focus. What's at the forefront of a person's mind? It's almost immediate. It was really interesting to watch it take place and have. And you may be like that. You know, one minute you're feeling grateful and thankful, and then the next minute something grabs your attention and you don't, you know, your condition changes. Inwardly, you feel frustrated or angry or deprived or like you missed out or it's too late or woe is me. And the condition of your heart's not grateful. It's complaining or negative. So practice. It's important to practice. And I want to just say that it's important to give yourself permission to start where you really are, in that you can identify the things that you can be thankful for, that you would like to be thankful for, even if those aren't things you at that moment feel thankful for. Okay, so you can start there. These are the things that I can be thankful. I'm going to think about those things. I'm going to give them my attention. I'm going to think about why I should be thankful. What would it be like if I didn't? And that's a great first step. But here's a second step. And I don't know that we think about this when we think about becoming thankful. But I think it's absolutely crucial. And it probably is preventative as well as is transformational. And that is to adopt an others first focus. Here's why this is like this. Let me read the passage first. There's two of them. Let no one, Paul says to the Corinthian church, let no one seek his own good, but that of his neighbor. What a simple, direct statement, right? I mean, it's pretty all-encompassing. Let who? No one. Do what? Seek his own good. Don't do it. Don't live with a me-first mentality. Don't wake up and think about what you need, what you want, and everybody else exists to help meet those needs. Paul says that's not a good way to live. Not just morally is it wrong. It is not the best way. It's not the preferable way. It is the way of seeking your own good, right? It's the way of meeting your own needs. It's the way of controlling others so that they can meet your needs. He says don't do that, but seek the good of who? Other people, your neighbor. So we're told to live this way. And again, understand that the directive of Scripture is not just a moral code and a rule book to follow, but it's descriptive of a life that is vastly preferable than any other life, and that is life trusting and knowing and following Jesus in His kingdom. But here is the second part that describes and gets at some of the transformational impact that happens when we give our focus to other people. Listen to this passage in Isaiah. I have never paid attention to this passage before this week. Read it, yes. But seen it for what it is and what it speaks to, no. Listen to it. And if you give yourself to the hungry and satisfy the desire of the afflicted, he's described nothing more than the simple others focus that we're talking about. Then, if you do these things, then your light will rise in the darkness, and your gloom will become like midday. Now, I want you to pause. Don't hear that as saying, hey, if you take care of the needy people, you will be famous for it and well appreciated. It's not what he's saying. He's saying when you give your focus to the good of others, then light will rise in the darkness of your own life. Light will displace your own sense of personal darkness, and your gloom, your woe is me, I don't have this, that, or the other, your gloom, my life is so bad, or I wish we had a different this or that in a political spectrum, or whatever, your gloom will become like midday. He's talking about the transformation that happens within a person's life when they have an external others focus. And then he says, and the Lord will continually guide you. What a beautiful description of a life that we would all prefer. When we live this way, the Lord begins to we sense and perceive His guidance and satisfy your desire. Where? When life is perfect on the mountaintops, everything's green and plush and the weather's 70 and sunny? No. He'll satisfy your desire where? In scorched places. In barren places of need, we become satisfied people, thankful, grateful people. Where's all this coming from? It comes from when we live and adopt an others focus. And then he says, He will give strength to your bones. And you will be like a watered garden and a spring of water whose waters do not fail. All of that simply describes that when I live and seek the good of others, when maybe like Daryl comes and says, Daryl has needs in his own life. But when he says, I see these people, can we focus? Can we give? Can we serve their good instead of just securing our own good? Then Isaiah describes an inner transformation. Light begins to replace darkness. Joy begins to replace gloom. We have a sense of I'm okay. Not comparatively. This is not, hey, I feel better because their life really is bad, so that makes me feel good. That's not what he's describing. There is a spiritual transformation that takes place in our hearts when we practice an others focus. When we give our attention to seeking and securing the good of other people. This is not just saying, hey, you all are fine. There are people less fortunate than you. You'll feel better if you're around them. They kind of make you feel better because their life is worse than yours. That is not at all life in His kingdom. This is when you focus and live to secure the good. Instead of securing your own good, remember we said that's the most ungrateful moments in our life. That's true. We are not grateful. We do not feel gratitude. Our gloom dominates. Our need pervades. When we say, I need my good to be secured, then I'll do this. That's not what Isaiah says. If we give others a reason to be thankful, we will find ourselves becoming thankful people. It really will become the condition of our hearts. So, that would be my urgent pleading with all of us. Practice. Practice replacing your thoughts of need and want and frustration. I'm not saying ignore. I'm not saying deny. I'm talking about focus. You can give voice to your pain. You can share it with others. You can do all of that stuff and not make that your focus. So practice putting your focus on the good that you could potentially truly be thankful for. And secondly, adopt. And this is something you're going to have to do in spite of your feelings. You have to adopt an others first focus. And as you begin to live that way, practicing and adopting that other first focus, inevitably, Isaiah's words will ring true. We'll find ourselves thankful. We'll find ourselves lifted out of gloom. We'll find ourselves reflecting the true condition of our hearts with authentic words of thanks and praise. No more dodging eye contact thank yous. We will be profoundly thankful people. Understand today, one more time, your pastor hadn't said, you should be thankful. That's not the message. The message is this: you can be thankful. We truly can. We can become thankful people. Let's ask God to do that. God, one of the most amazing things that could happen as a result of us being together, singing the songs that we sang, giving of our financial resources that we gave, listening to the lyrics shared to us by Joey, and hearing your scriptures proclaimed, one of the most amazing things that could happen is that the way we live could begin to change today in this regard. That we could become, maybe even from this moment forward, we could become increasingly thankful. As we practice focusing on the things that we could be thankful for, and maybe even are thankful for, and as we practice beginning to adopt and grasp and insist on an others first focus, whether we're going to bring blankets for the homeless or serve at New Hope Food Pantry or meet a need that our neighbor has or listen closely to a loved one who needs someone to share with, or we pray incessantly for the need of someone in our G2 group, but we begin to live in a way that says others first, me second, and I trust Jesus will get my back. And you will make us a thankful people. And if we sit down this Thursday at a table with friends and family, whether it's here or in another part of the country, even by then, we will be more authentically, genuinely thankful people. And for that, today, for the potential of that, we turn our attention heavenward and we thank you that we're not stuck in the condition that we're in, that you're here to lead us. You're here. You are here to invade our lives with the reality of heaven. It is good. It truly is. Amen.